Welcome back to the Junkyard Pod. I'm Tony Pesta, alongside Jackson Flickinger, and today we are going to be taking a dive into the world of NBA free agency, taking a look at what options the Cleveland Cavaliers have, who they should target, and maybe even who they should avoid. To set the stage, the Cavs, like many other teams who are in this playoff contender bubble, they have limited options for improving. They've stacked most of their chips on really 3 to 4 guys, depending on how you view Allen and his future. But outside of that, it's relatively unlikely they make any major upgrades this summer. Internal growth and moves on the margin seem like the most realistic path forward for this team until maybe doomsday with Donovan Mitchell's looming free agency. We'll have to wait and see what they do with that. But as for this current offseason, they have a $12 million mid-level exception at their disposal to either sign one or multiple players. Then they have available room to look for someone maybe on the veteran minimum scale. And of course, they have a number of players they're likely looking to trade or at least hearing offers for. But today we're going to focus mostly on the free agency side of things. But I do want to start off by asking you, Jackson, what are your expectations for this offseason? Are the Cavs going to make waves, or will Kobe Altman continue to approach retooling this roster with a bit of caution?
I kind of think that he's going to make some waves. I know that Kobe has said something like his exit interview. He was just talking about how great it is to have, a 53 win team or whatever, 50, 52, 53, whatever.
51.
51. Wow.
Should have been 53. They dropped a couple.
I was giving him that Jazz game that Karis LeVert gave Clarkson like 10 points in 2 seconds.
Not 9 points in like a span of 10 seconds. Yeah, that
was other game?
A great moment.
What other game could we give them?
The Clippers game early in the season. I forget how much they were up by, but I think they blew like a double-digit lead. And
that was like
minute 45.
That was like Darius Garland's one of his first couple games back, and he was like, I'm taking over the fourth quarter, guys, and he had like a million turnovers. That was rough.
Yeah.
So anyway, the 51 win Cavs with a great team on the spreadsheets, and I think that's something that I feel like we brought up a lot. That just didn't really come through in the playoffs. But Kobe, in his exit interviews, talked about how, this is a really good team. This is a great step forward and everything. But I think he kind of saw what everybody else saw in the playoffs, and there's not that many avenues to improve this team. As we're going to talk about some guys that the Cavs could get on the mid-level exception. Those guys would be super helpful. But I think, I think the Cavs just really need some things that you can't get from a mid-level guy, and you can't like trade Isaac Okoro and get somebody who's really good, or like Jetty Osman, because if they were any good, they'd be helping your team. So
exactly,
so I think that's where I think Kobe's going to have to get creative, and it's like the same thing with like Karis LeVert. Like I have a season in review coming up for Karis LeVert on For the Sword soon, but the title is like Karis LeVert's not the problem nor the solution at the wing. It's like, the Cavs just need more guys who can play and do multiple things. Karis LeVert's one of them. So if you trade him, the upside isn't as high as you would like it to be. So that's where it's like, that's where I kind of think like a Jared Allen trade could happen, or at least you're going to think about a Jared Allen trade because it's like, that's what other avenues do you have? You're not, shout out to our guy, Sam Amico, but, we're probably not trading Darius Garland.
Yeah, not sure that one's happening anytime soon.
So you're not trading Donovan Mitchell, at least not this season.
Unless he makes it so obvious that he's gone, right?
Right. I mean, some would argue he's trying to make that obvious, but
not quite to the trade him point.
Right. I think it's like, hey, on one hand, Donovan Mitchell just had the best season of his career, and I think there's a lot of areas that he can improve in. And I think one of the reasons why he had a really good season is because I think he fits well with a lot of these guys that the Cavs have. But that fit is also like his fit is good with the core, not with, Isaac Okoro
guys.
Yeah. Not with, Jetty Osman. So that's where it's like, this is why this is such an important year, because we got to figure out like Kobe needs to figure out, how do we make this all work? So I think he's targeting the guys that we've heard come up. I think he's targeting the right type of players and stuff, but the mid-level exception is not going to save this team. It's going to help, but they still need to do some other creative retooling around the roster.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to find any one player that's available for the mid-level exception that's really going to be a needle mover. It's really kind of the conundrum they're in right now. They have a lot of players that you would really hope to replace and upgrade on, but their value isn't exactly super high if you're trying to trade an Okoro, Cedi Osman. That's why Jarrett Allen is rumored in all of the trades for like the big swings, because if there was someone on the roster that you can trade, he's the one who would bring in the best return. What exactly that return would be, I'm not sure, but he is kind of the biggest swing that you have. I do think Kobe, even though he has stressed or kind of implied during his end of the season conference that he's going to be patient, not make any sweeping changes, I think he's kind of unfairly gotten the reputation of being a guy who doesn't make moves just because he sat out one deadline. Kobe, throughout his entire time in Cleveland, has been really one of the most trigger happy guys in the front office. I mean, he is not afraid to make a trade. When you look at the turnaround that this roster has had from Andre Drummond and Larry Nance to Markkanen to Mitchell, I mean, he's not a guy who's afraid to get crazy and do outlandish things, as Brian Windhorst has suggested. Exactly where this offseason will take him, it's kind of hard to say. I think anything on the margins is possible when we talk about, Okoro, Osman, Stevens, Rubio, like any one of those guys getting moved, I wouldn't be surprised. Jarrett Allen, I think we're still in the stage, for me at least, where if the right deal is there, I think Kobe does it immediately. I'm not sure if he's going to take anything that isn't a clear upgrade at this point, though. I think he might be a little more patient with Allen when we get to the deadline and potentially next offseason. That's where the sense of urgency will really be creeping up. I think when we talk about Donovan Mitchell, it's easy to forget that he still is on contract until 2026. We have him for the entirety of next season, and then I believe his player option is in 2026. So I don't think we're in the offseason where we need to trade him just yet. I think all of this will come up next season, next summer. Hopefully the Cavs won't go out as sad as they did in the playoffs this year, because then maybe we'll have a little bit more, a little bit more security in how long he's going to be staying here. Would you say, Jackson, that the Cavs' biggest need is a 3-point shooting wing probably this summer?
They need anybody who can shoot threes. I don't really even like to limit it to just the wing, because I think, like, ideally the Cavs do need a 3 that they can play with the starting lineup. So that's obviously the number one concern. It's going to be the number one concern until LeBron James returns. Then that concern is gone.
Yeah.
But that's going to be like the concern until they get a guy. But you're not, like, the guy you're getting in with the mid-level, like, if you're getting a high volume, good 3-point shooting wing, those guys aren't mid-level exception guys.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, when we talk about how the Cavs were able to rebuild so fast, and I think you did a good job of talking about how Kobe is definitely somebody who likes to make moves. It's like his favorite thing just to do trades. He's done trades just for the sake of doing them. He's the reason why the Cavs have been able to turn it around so quickly is they've really won on the margins and areas and valued things that other teams didn't value. Like the Jarrett Allen trade, I think, is really the catalyst to this whole rebuild, because teams were like, oh, this is just a rim running center. What good is that? And the Cavs showed that, hey, this can really lead to success. The same with, they drafted Darius Garland, who a lot of people had a lot of questions about. If we redid that draft, he would certainly go a lot higher than he did. And the same is true with, even the Evan Mobley pick, like, he slid down to him, So they grabbed Donovan Mitchell when his value was the lowest, So it's like, even though they paid a lot for him, I think all in all, I still think the Cavs got a really good deal considering how many years were left on his contract when they got him. So
Mhm.
they've really built this team by using the market inefficiencies to their advantage. But the thing that's not a market inefficiency is guys who can shoot and guys who can shoot on the wing. And that's why they have no wings. That's why teams like the Raptors are like overvalued, because
Mhm.
they have all the things that people want. It's just if you have all the things that people want, you may not have a good actual fitting basketball team. But so that's where it's like the Cavs just, they're not going to get that guy with the mid level. And that's why, to get somebody who really does fit, you may need to move, a Jared Allen. So any Jared Allen complaints isn't due to his game. It's more due to the fact
The
that,
fit.
yeah, because we have, the Cavs drafted Evan Mobley, and I think his best position is going to be when he matures is going to be the 5, and a lot of times you're going to get in the playoff series where you're going to want to close with him and 4 shooters out there, and that's never going to be Jared Allen. And Evan Mobley's not just going to become, a stretch 4 overnight that takes more than 4 or 5 threes a game. Like that's not in the cards.
Mhm.
So that's where all these issues come from.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. Just to kind of counter or maybe try and get in the mind of anyone who is sticking by Jared Allen, or maybe why Kobe would be more patient, is I would say that when you look at the Cavs and you compare them to other teams, there are a lot of teams that have, multiple non-shooting big men on their team. Now, maybe they don't play them together the way the Cavs do. That's something that's a little more unique. But really, the issue with the Cavs is they basically have 2 shooters on the entire roster. It's like Garland and Mitchell are the only 2 guys that can really shoot with any sort of efficiency and volume. You have Jetty, who he's Jetty. He's a little bit inconsistent. He's probably their next best shooter. Karis LeVert did a wonderful job turning into the closest thing that he could become as the catch and shoot guy, but I don't think he'll ever really be a traditional shooting threat. Dean Wade is another guy who, just had an off year, lost his confidence, wasn't really much of a threat out there, didn't shoot with any volume. Coro obviously improved as a shooter, but he's not really a volume shooter. And that's where the Cavs run into this big problem where you mentioned the Raptors. You look at teams like the Celtics. There's another team out there with a bunch of wings that I just blanked on, the Bucks. All these teams where it's like they just have 6 guys that can go out there and shoot. The Miami Heat. The Cavs are just kind of on the outside looking in with all of these wings. The Clippers is the team I was thinking of. They have like every prototypical 3-and-D wing guy you could think of. And the Cavs are just missing out on basically all of that. And so if you manage to add either one legit 3-point shooter or multiple guys who can shoot the 3 ball in free agency this offseason, I think that could on paper help open up the spacing for this Cavs team, even with Allen and Mobley. One thing that I think it's overlooked when we talk about the Cavs' collapse in the playoffs and their lack of spacing and kind of all of the issues of Jared Allen being highlighted is that they lost Lauri Markkanen and Kevin Love within the same year. And that really hurts your front court spacing when you're not able to stagger Allen and Mobley at all. And you basically just have to play the 2 of them together. And when you are trying to bench one of them, you're putting in Lamar Stevens at small ball 4, who isn't exactly giving you any spacing. You're playing Jetty, who, again, as we mentioned, he's a capable shooter, but he's just inconsistent on nights where he doesn't have it. He's going to hurt your spacing. So the Cavs just have some issues that they need to address, and trading Allen is maybe the easiest way to find a solution all at once. But I don't think they need to necessarily trade Allen. I would like to see them try and address it through free agency first, and then go from there in the deadline.
Yeah, definitely. It's just one of the things that the Donovan Mitchell trade does is it just sped everything up. Like if the Donovan Mitchell trade never happened, I think you could let this experiment go out for 2 or 3 years before you really like went all in a direction. And the Cavs just don't have that luxury with Donovan Mitchell trade kind of accelerating everything. And that's, I still believe you do that deal 10 times out of 10. It's just the reality of the NBA that once you go all in like that, it's hard to make Donovan Mitchell a all NBA type player try to sell him on his third contract in a situation that is still kind of being really patient.
Yeah, I agree for sure. But bringing our topic back to free agency and focusing on what the Cavs can do to improve with their $12 million mid-level exception, Jackson, assuming you can get anyone within reason for the MLE, who is your primary target if you're the Cavaliers?
Anybody within reason.
Yes.
So I
So
guess
not Chris Middleton.
I guess if you could get anybody within reason that's not Chris Middleton, I mean Harrison Barnes would be great. I don't think he's going to be going for the mid-level exception, but crazier things have happened. One of the things that I think is really interesting to I'm not a cap expert.
Neither am I.
Yeah, I'm not a CBA expert or anything like that, but one of the things to really monitor is I think the market's going to be a lot different than what we are expecting, or at least a lot different than it's been in previous years. I think there's going to be some things that surprise us in terms of maybe guys going way higher or way lower than we think. I mean, Harrison Barnes I think he'd be kind of not the most ideal fit, because I still want somebody who could shoot a lot of threes and somebody who teams have to cover in the playoffs. And if there's one thing that we know about Harrison Barnes, it's that teams are certainly are more than okay with leaving him open in the playoffs. But he's somebody who, if he just so happened to fall into the Cavs' lap, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. That's actually the same guy that I had as my number one pick there. I mean, he already has experience bringing a championship to Cleveland, so that's a good start for him.
For sure.
He's the perfect wing size. He's the ideal guy that you would want at small forward. You could put him small ball 4, and he won't get absolutely killed. To me, he is kind of the ideal glue guy. He's not like the best glue guy in the NBA, but he plays that role pretty damn good. He did it well in Golden State. He's doing it in Sacramento. He's not a ball stopper. He plays his role. He shoots when he's open. He can put the ball on the floor to a decent degree. He's not as athletic as he used to be, but he's still a little bit of a threat to get to the rim. And he's just a smart player. He's not really going to, other than when he's in those drastic shooting slumps and he loses his confidence, he's really not going to kill you at any point. He's always just going to play solid ball on both ends of the floor. And that's really what the Cavs need, is a guy that they can put out at small forward and just not be run off the floor because of him, right? Like when Okoro's out there and teams are completely ignoring him and he's 0 for 4 from the corner, it gets hard to keep him out there. Same with Jetty. You can put Harrison Barnes out there, not saying that he solves their issues at all, or he doesn't solve all of their issues is what I meant to say, but he is someone who is consistent enough to kind of put the Stars in a position to win the game. Whereas Okoro and the rest of these wings that the Cavs currently have, a lot of times it feels like they're limiting what the Stars are capable of doing by the lack of spacing that they bring, the lack of consistency, and just all the different deficiencies that our wings currently have.
Yeah, one of the things that I will say, this isn't really about Harrison Barnes. It's more about the Cavs. The Cavs, so I feel like when you get to the playoffs, there's guys who shoot well in the regular season, and then there's guys who, once they get to the playoffs, teams are okay with letting them shoot. They're fake good shooters, and I feel like Harrison Barnes kind of falls into that category.
Yeah.
Where teams are it's fine that you're a 36, 35% 3-point shooter. We're just going to live with you shooting. We're just not going to care what you do. We're just going to, pack the paint or focus on the Stars. Yeah, right. So one of the things that kind of scares me about a guy like that is the Cavs are fine in the regular season with Isaac Okoro. They can make it work. When teams ignore Okoro in the regular season, it's hurt them in some matchups, but as we said, they won 58 games last year. We just keep giving 51. Them wins. Should have won 58.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and the offense was, I believe, it was a top 10 offense still in the regular season.
I think it might have been 8th.
So it's when you're talking about a guy like Harrison Barnes, and I think this maybe to a lesser degree Kyle Kuzma, because I think Kyle Kuzma has a lot more of an offensive bag. That where it's if you're not a guy who teams are running out to and closing out to in a playoff setting, how much of an upgrade are you over Isaac Okoro? So that's something to keep in mind, especially when we talk about like a Jared Allen trade. Like if you had a Jared Allen trade and you got a Harrison Barnes fake good shooter, I don't think that's making anything any better. I think you
Yeah.
need to get like a real good shooter. So all that to say, Harrison Barnes would be fantastic on this team, but you still have issues even if you got a Harrison Barnes.
Yeah, those are fantastic points. I'm glad that you brought that all up. Kuzma is someone who I'll just briefly mention. I don't know if you had him on your list. I didn't put him on my list just because I don't think he's going to go for the mid-level. Even Harrison Barnes is a bit of a stretch, but Kuzma, he is also kind of a fake good shooter. He kind of gets the rep of being a shooter, even though he's not really that good at it. But the thing that he does bring to the table is he can actually put the ball on the floor. He has a little bit of a post game. He can score in the mid range. He can get to the rim. So those are all good qualities to have. Uh, the next guy that I'm going to bring up, who is second on my list, who has been a very popular target amongst Cavs fans, I think he's a guy who could help, just like Harrison Barnes, but he also falls into the category of being a fake good shooter, and that's Grant Williams. He is a guy who has played competitive basketball in Boston for a few years now. He has proven that he can be out there in big games. He can make a difference. He's a versatile defender. Again, he has good size. He can play the three, he can play the four. On paper, he's a good floor spacer, but as you mentioned, and I planned on bringing this up with Grant Williams, he's not really a floor spacer once you get to the playoffs because teams have no problem leaving him open. Now, he is more capable of making opponents pay for leaving him open than Isaac Okoro is, for example. Something that I pulled up with a few of these free agents is just their percentage shooting from the corner, because I think whoever you sign with that MLE is probably going to be spending most of their time in the corner. Grant Williams throughout the regular season shot 42% from the corner, which was the 11th best percentage for players who took at least 120. So he's in the upper echelon of players who can spot up in the corner, catch and shoot. He's another guy who on paper fits. I would gladly take him to the Cavs. I think he helps them a lot. But in terms of moving the needle, as we mentioned at the start, I'm a little skeptical if Grant Williams is going to take the Cavs from where they were last year to making a finals run.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. A good test is if you're playing that team in the playoffs, are you okay with that player getting a wide open three? And
Yeah.
it's like when the Cavs are playing the Celtics, it's like, if Grant Williams is going to beat you, that's fine. It's just not your night. But you can't let, all the other guys, beat you. And that's kind of where it's like, well, Grant Williams, is he helpful? Yeah. Is he solving the issues? No. And that's kind of what we keep going back to when you talk about the mid-level, is that the mid-level is not solving your issues, even if you get a guy that you really want. So even like the top guy on my list, Harrison Barnes, he's not solving all the Cavs issues. He's helping, and that's a step in the right direction, but it's not, there's no magic pill that we can just take and make everything go away. So I like that.
Yeah, and I think I also just wanted to bring up real quick before you go to another player. I think that's why I wanted to set the expectations for the offseason entering this, because I think a lot of Cavs fans are hoping for the big swing or the guy who's going to come in and fix everything. I think the reality is you're just going to get a guy who helps if everything goes right. We just want a guy who will help, because I don't think you're going to get someone that fixes everything. There's no magic bullet. We just need assets that are going to help. But anyways, you can go ahead with whoever your second pick is for the Cavs mid-level.
All right, so this is a new addition. I didn't have it when we first came up with this list, so I'm shooting from the hip. But give me Seth Curry. He's not solving your issues, as in like he's 6'2", and he's not a big 6'2". Which is kind of the Cavs theme. They love small 6'2" guys.
Yeah.
So. But he's somebody who, hey, we'll talk about somebody who can shoot the three ball. He can shoot the three ball. That's really, he's somebody who, what I want this team to have, and I'm okay with playing small in the backcourt or even small at the wing. If you have somebody who, when like Allen or Mobley sets a screen for them, the whole defense is shifting, like, okay, well, Curry's coming off of a screen. We got to all move, because this guy's a 40% 3-point shooter. looking at his numbers, a 43% corner 3-point shooter, last year 39% above the break. Those are excellent numbers. He was even, those were low by his standards, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like somebody like that coming off the bench. He's not somebody who you're going to be like, oh yeah, Seth Curry definitely in our closing lineup. No, but he could be like, okay, he can get you back into a game. He can really, his presence could help an offense out of a rut, and they don't have that guy on the bench. And that's something that we can't really say about Harrison Barnes, Grant Williams, maybe Kyle Kuzma could definitely fall into that category, but in a very different way, in a way that isn't necessarily as much of like a off-ball threat. But anyways, so he's somebody who I would definitely be okay with them taking a look at. I think he'd be a fantastic fit.
That's a fantastic one. I do think Cavs fans have potentially overlooked the addition of someone like Curry just because of his height. Obviously, there's such a huge gap on the wing that we all want to see that addressed. But you bring up a fantastic point there, is that, you can't really overstate the value of having a guy who can come in off the bench and pull you out of a rut. The value of having Seth Curry come in rather than Ricky Rubio, for example, and just nailing 2 or 3 3-pointers, like that can help swing things back in your favor and set the starters up to finish what Seth Curry started. That's something that Kevin Love did at times last season and at the start of this season, where it's like the Cavs kind of come out slow. Kevin Love comes in, gives them a few easy buckets, and now the ball is rolling again. So Seth Curry is a great choice there. As most of the Cavs fans will probably feel, it's maybe not the most ideal one in terms of you really want to upgrade on size. But again, look, if it's between playing Ricky Rubio again or giving Seth Curry those minutes, I would gladly take the Seth Curry minutes. So that's a nice little shooting from the hip there. I like it, Jackson.
Yeah, and it's just like you're not solving this team's issues. So, like a Seth Curry solve some of like the off-ball spacing, which I think has been a real problem, and something that I think could really be improved upon, even with Mitchell and Garland, as I don't think they were optimized off-ball. And I think if they're optimized off-ball, it kind of alleviates some of these issues anyways. But he would definitely help there. So, whenever you can get one of the best shooters of all time, that's what I think Seth Curry is. It's just he's not very good at the rest of basketball. Like his brother's a lot better at the rest of basketball and a better shooter, but still that doesn't discount what Seth is as a shooter. So, the Cavs need shooting. Give me the best shooter available, and that's probably Seth.
Yeah. It's always great just to get guys who are good at basketball, guys who can do something really, really good. Even if they maybe don't fit perfectly, if you just add talent to this team, you could trade Curry at the deadline even potentially and package him with something else and get a better return. So I do think that adding Seth Curry, I wouldn't rule it out.
One thing I will say about adding guys with very distinct skills, that it gives you the flexibility to really change up your lineup depending on who you're playing, like change up who your closing lineup is and stuff. It's like there's going to be a lot of matchups where a potential Seth Curry guy pickup doesn't really help because he doesn't have any size. The Cavs don't have size in the backcourt anyways. But there could be a couple situations where it really does help. And that's why I like guys like that, just because they can swing a series or a matchup in a way that, maybe just a better basketball player that's not as skilled in one area doesn't.
Yeah, I agree. Another guy similar to Seth Curry that I'll toss in here just to mention, Dante DiVincenzo. I think he's an interesting guy to target. He's also undersized. He brings basically all the same problems that Seth Curry would bring. Not as good of a shooter, but he's a solid defender. He has proven that he can play a role. He is more of an off-ball guy. As you mentioned, just getting the defense to shift, getting someone out there who defenses care about. I don't think you would have to stick Seth Curry or DiVincenzo in the corner and have them spot up like you would with Barnes or Grant Williams. You could set screens for them. You can have them run around. And that's always great to have a defense care about more than 2 people on the floor at a time. He shot 40% from the corner last season, which is what you would want if he was going to be spotting up there. But the guy who I will pick as my third player.
Oh, hold on. I do want to say something because Dante DiVincenzo was on my list. He was
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
he was my next guy. I think he is not a perfect fit,
Mm,
but I think I think the thing about DiVincenzo that I really like is that he's more than just a shooter. He's a decent distributor. He's somebody
mhm.
who is comfortable dribbling the ball. Um,
That'll help.
his shot is actually the thing that I worry about the most because
Mm,
he shot 39% last year, which is great, but that's not really who he's been throughout his career.
yeah.
So that's where it's like, I don't, like the year before, he was a 34% shooter, which we have those. So, he's not
Mhm.
really helping there. And then like 2021, he was a 38% shooter. It's like, oh, yeah, that's what you need. And then the year before, he was 33%. So it's like, you know, that that's where I'm not as sure as like, like Seth Curry. I know that he's going to be like a bad Seth Curry shooting year is going to be like 38%, and like a Dante DiVincenzo isn't.
Mhm.
Whereas Dante DiVincenzo, obviously, he has a lot more size than, he's somebody who I think I think the Cavs could get away with playing him at the three
Mm. He's
due to
not a
their
bad
size.
defender.
Right. And due to their size in the front court. But it's
Mm.
just where it's like if his 3-point shot kind of goes away like it has for whole seasons, then he starts to look a lot like Jetty Osmond. And then why would we get Dante DiVincenzo? We have
Hey, the
Dante
more jetty,
DiVincenzo
the
at home.
better.
So that's my big concern with him. But I would definitely be glad with him. So
Yeah,
sorry for
I
just
agree.
hijacking that whole thing.
Oh no, you're good. I wasn't sure if you had DiVincenzo mentioned or not. I had a couple different guys here as my third option. I figured I would just pivot depending on who you brought up. But the other guy who I think basically again pretty similar role to DiVincenzo would be Max Strus. He's a little
Mhm.
taller. Uh, Clearly just had a great playoff run. Kind of fizzled out in the finals, but 45% from the corner. That's third best in the NBA this season, minimum 120 attempts. He's still a little undersized for what you would want for at the wing, but I mean, the guy just played great basketball. He's proven that he can do it. He's again another guy who can play off ball, which is what you want. You don't need someone who's going to dribble like Cam Reddish, and not to throw shade at anyone, but you don't need a guy who's going to hijack the offense. You need a guy who's going to play off ball, catch and shoot, play his role on defense, and get the job done there and shoot efficiently. And I think Max Strus is a pretty good option there for that.
Really like Max Drews. I didn't pick him because I figured you would pick him, so I'm
Mm,
glad you did. He is definitely, we talk about the thing I like about Max Drews is he gets the shots up.
mm,
If you look at his per 36 numbers, uh, last season he had 8.9 3-point attempts per 36. The season before he had 10. The season before he had 10.5. So this is a guy who gets shots up when he's in, and unlike guys like Kelly Oubre, the ball goes in pretty decently. So it's not
yeah,
just
it's a good clip.
because again, people forget we have Jetty Osmond. Jetty Osmond gets shots up. Like
Mhm.
people are like, well, Kelly Oubre, he gets at least he gets shots up. It's like Jetty gets shots up. Like he he gets a ton of them up. So that's
Mhm.
it's and then people get mad at him because they don't go in, even though they go in at a higher clip than a lot of these people we've mentioned. So anyways, that's where I'm like, I think Max Strus is probably the best overall fit because he's like, he can start games, teams aren't just going to forget about him. He's really like, he's not as good as Harrison Barnes or Kyle Kuzma, but he's a better fit, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And just the volume of the shots, like we talked a lot about the Cavs space or pace this year and the way that they played. If you have a guy who's actually a threat to shoot in transition, and again, actually a threat, like he can make these shots, your pace is going to go up a little bit. Right now, Jetty, outside of Mitchell and Garland, of course, Jetty's like the only guy if you're pushing in transition you want to see taking a three. Max Strus would be one of those guys, and that would help a lot. Did you have a third guy? I'm not sure what number we're at here. Did you have a third
Oh,
option?
I have backup options. I'm gonna give you a couple. So somebody else who I thought of, Utah Watanabe. is somebody that I really like. He One of the things I find intriguing about him, he's not a young guy. He's going to be like 29 next year, but he's still kind of finding his legs in the NBA, like in terms of what his role is, how he's going to be playing. Like if you look at his minutes per season, like his minutes per game, they've never gotten to 20 minutes per game yet, but they're starting to creep up. And I think he did some really good things in a really bad situation with the Nets. Like, I think like that Nets bench and supporting cast was really poor, and he was put in a tough spot, but he was still able, he shot 44% from three. The 3-point attempts aren't very high, only 2.3. So that's something to take to keep in mind. But I think what you're buying is somebody who's still finding his legs in the NBA, and maybe he hasn't reached the best, he hasn't reached the best version of himself, even though he's not like a young guy by any stretch. Somebody else who definitely bears mentioning, Taurean Prince, who just got his, the Timberwolves declined the team option for him. He's somebody who I think would really help. He's a 38% 3-point shooter. He's a good corner 3-point shooter, 43% last season. That's something that you want. My concern with Taurean Prince is kind of the same thing. Like, just, maybe the volume isn't quite what I would, a 5.9 per 36. The volume's not super high last year. It was higher the year before. That's kind of an area where I'm a little concerned. Like, is he somebody who teams would cover in a playoff setting for the Cavs?
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that he is, but he's somebody who can play the 3 and 4, which is really helpful. Gives you versatility. We talked about one of the things about, like Grant Williams would be a lot more palatable if he's somebody who could actually play the 3 and 4. He's really someone that could only play the 4. I know people have compared him to Lowry, but he's not really. Lowry's a lot better than that, and like a lot more athletic, I think. So you could get away with it, whereas you couldn't get away with it with Williams, I don't think. But Prince, you can. So I think that's why he has a lot of value there. So those are my like honorable mentions. Do you have any honorable mentions that you want to throw out?
Yeah, Yuta Watanabe was also on mine. I think the guy, it's such an interesting player because he is 28. He hasn't really found his place in the NBA yet, despite being a flamethrower from deep. I mean, he was one of the best catch and shoot guys in the NBA this year. Granted, the volume was very low. I did take a look. The most threes he has attempted in a game is 8. So he's not exactly putting them up at a high rate, but he was extremely efficient. He's 6'8", super long arms. It's a bit of a concern that he hasn't found his place in the NBA yet, but sometimes guys just go under the radar. And if the Cavs could get him for even, because you can split the mid-level into multiple players, if you could get him on the lower end, I'm not sure what his price will be this year, considering I'd have to imagine teams around the league are noticing how well he shot the ball last season, and maybe some team will get crazy. But if the Cavs can add him on the lower end of the mid-level, I'm all in on that. I think he's worth taking a chance on. Same with Prince. If you can get him for the lower end of the mid-level or even a veteran minimum, which I think might be a stretch. I'm not sure where his price is, but again, just getting as many guys that can help, getting as many guys as you can throw out there who have proven to be somewhat consistent, somewhat efficient, and can put up 3-pointers is really what this team needs in the offseason.
Yeah, and you got to remember, Watanabe spent time with the Raptors. So talk about a situation where you can't develop and grow. Gotta come to Cleveland if you really want to become the best version of yourself.
Of course. So we'll finish this off. I want to ask you, do you have any players, any targets who you feel the Cavs shouldn't be looking at, or that the Cavs Twitter maybe is high on that you're not really as high on?
I mean, just Kelly Oubre is just not really my guy. Just not the 3-point percentage isn't really what we want to see. And I think he falls into that category. He falls into the Harrison Barnes category, and I don't think that's really like what the Cavs need. Because like, we say I'm pretty critical of Isaac Okoro, but Isaac Okoro does a lot of things very well. They just nobody covers him. He doesn't really have a good offensive feel for the game. And Kelly Oubre, I kind of think he doesn't really have a great offensive feel either. It's just where Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade have no feel and don't shoot. Kelly Oubre shoots,
shoot.
and that's not like you need guys who can shoot. Like you definitely need that, but I don't. The Cavs have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley, who are all to varying degrees efficient offensive scorers. So whenever you're taking the ball out of their hands, it better be for a good reason. And Kelly Oubre isn't that good reason, especially if he's somebody who is going to get shots up no matter what. So he's not somebody that I would be particularly thrilled with.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. I also had Kelly Oubre. I will say that if it's between getting nobody and getting Kelly Oubre for the full MLE, I would take it, of course. But all the things that you mentioned are the same concerns for me. I think Kelly Oubre is very good on paper. He's a versatile wing, great size. He's athletic, 20-point per game scorer, jumps off the page. But then you look at the efficiency, 30% shooter. It really doesn't feel like he has impacted winning at any point in his career. His stint with the Warriors was pretty underwhelming. I question, as I mentioned earlier in the pod, the Cavs don't really need a guy who's going to hijack the offense. They need someone who's going to play a role, and that role is going to be mostly off ball. Kelly Oubre is the type of guy who needs the ball in his hands. He likes to shoot a lot. The Chase Down pod mentioned this when they were talking about the draft and Imani Bates, and I think this also applies to a guy like Kelly Oubre, where he's the type of guy that needs to take 6 or 7 shots a night to really get a feel for his offense. He's not a guy who's going to come off the bench third quarter and be ready to shoot 2 for 3. Oubre needs to put shots up. You're going to have to live with the 0-4 shooting nights if you want to get the 5 for 7 shooting nights, right? He's not really an instant rhythm guy. He needs to be a high usage guy in order to really get the best out of him. And I think that's something that could hold the Cavs back because you have Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. If you want someone taking bad shots, it should be those two guys. You want to limit the difficult shots for the rest of the supporting cast. And I feel like Kelly Oubre comes with a bit of baggage in terms of shot selection.
Yeah. Somebody else we do not want is Miles Bridges.
Yeah.
From all the off the court issues that are very concerning. And anytime you have a favorite team, you want guys who you can like positively root for. So that it just complicates everything. And one thing that I will say for everybody who's like, his fit, I don't know if his fit is as good as what everyone thinks it might be, even if everything else was not really there. He's somebody who is an efficient scorer. He scores well at the rim, but he has, it's all good. His fourth year, like he's been in the league for 4 years. Only one season has he shot over 33% from 3, which is not really the percentage that like people talk about him. Like he's a great shooter. In 2021, he shot 40% from 3, which was great, but that's not the person he's been for the other 3 years. And then whenever you're talking about somebody who he didn't play basketball for a full season, especially for off the court issues, that's concerning. What guy are you getting? And then you throw in a suspension on top of that, I believe, because I believe he still has to serve a 30-game suspension. So like that's a lot of issues. And that's not even counting the real issue. So I'm fine. We don't need that.
Yeah, I agree with that. The on-the-court fit is questionable. All the off-court stuff is not good at all. Definitely someone who I wouldn't feel good rooting for. I would have trouble doing that. And another guy who I'll throw in here who is not on the same level as Miles Bridges in terms of off-court stuff and just being a vibe killer, but I'm good on Dillon Brooks. Cavs don't need him. He doesn't really bring what they need, and I don't think he's that good of a basketball player. So I'll throw him in there as the last guy who I would pass on.
I'm actually okay. I'm actually okay with Dylan Brooks. Um,
Okay.
I think he's an idiot. Like I'm not a huge fan. Like I'm not a fan of him, but
Mm,
I think he has good size.
yeah.
He is athletic, and he can create his own shot.
Mm,
Um, I think if the Cavs were able to keep him in line, I think he would be very helpful, and I think he would fit in very well. But you could also see a version where he doesn't fit in and
mm,
he doesn't get along and things go very poorly. So that's kind of a high risk move, but I think
yeah.
like it could possibly pay off. And
I could see
I
that. Yeah.
I completely like I'm not gonna be like advocating for them to get him, but I'm also like if they got him, he's somebody that I think you wouldn't have a hard time talking yourself into.
Mm. He's definitely the type of player that I feel like you would enjoy more when he's on your team, just for all like the annoying stuff from our perspective. When he's on your team, you kind of get behind it, the fiery competitiveness, getting in people's faces, and it's also something that maybe this Cavs team could use is a bit of toughness. So there's upside there. I wouldn't be extremely upset if they got Dylan Brooks. It's just someone who, like, if the Cavs don't sign someone, whether it be for the mid-level exception or even a veteran minimum who can just shoot the ball efficiently, I'll be a little upset. But if they added Dylan Brooks as one of a couple different guys they got this offseason, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all.
Yeah, he's not an efficient shooter, so that's kind of what it comes
Mm,
back to. Um, but he, he's a good defender.
mm.
He,
He can
you don't get,
dribble.
you don't have, he's 6'7". These are all things the Cavs don't have.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I'm,
mm,
you could do worse. And I think
for
that
sure.
if, if he was a, if he went to the market last year, like last off
Mm,
season, I think he's somebody who gets a pretty good sized contract.
yeah,
But everything that happened this year rightfully left a sour
mm,
taste in everyone's mouth. And
yeah,
I think even if John Morant wasn't in the trouble, if John Morant wasn't in the trouble he was in, I still think the Grizzlies probably try to make it work out with Dylan
mm,
Brooks. But Dylan Brooks, and then you have the John Morant situation, I think that becomes a little too much. So,
yeah,
and that's when you want to move on. So I would, you know, we'll see. We'll see. I think it's not the end of the world if
yeah.
that was the move.
I agree. Buying low on a guy who, like you said last year, probably would have gone for higher on the market. It's not a horrible idea. It's just someone who I would probably not like. I'm not advocating for, I guess, but if he comes to Cleveland, of course, I'll be rooting for him. But that's going to do it for this episode of the
Well,
Junkyard
you
Pod.
never got to my third guy.
Yeah, who was your third guy? You had some honorable mentions. Let's
Yeah,
hear
I
it.
was. I'm
We
building
can
up to
fill
the
it in.
third guy. The third guy. So what if I told you? So high volume 3-point shooter.
Is this Kevin Love?
He can play the 4. He can play the 5 sometimes. Yeah, it's
Is this
Kevin
going to be
Love.
Kevin
Of
Love?
course, it's
Oh
Kevin Love.
man,
A great locker
I
room
knew it.
leader. He's somebody who everyone in the locker room looks up to. If you talk to Isaiah Mobley for 2 seconds, he's just talking about Kevin Love, about how good of a mentor he is. I think the biggest mistake that the Cavs made last season was believing in their own hubris and believing
Mm,
in themselves too much, I believe. And I think the Knicks gave them some humble pie. And I think bringing back Kevin Love, who I don't think has a big market out there, his shot never really came around with Miami. So we don't need to like act like, oh yeah, he was a great 3-point shooter again. Because
mm,
if he was the guy he was in 2022, then teams would be lining up to sign him, but he's not. So I think he would be a really good fit. Somebody who you can play at you can play at the 4. He solves a lot of bench issues. He brings a lot of spacing. You know, he helps rebounding. Kevin Love, he's literally, if you just looked at his stats, if Kevin Love wasn't on the team last year, you would say Kevin Love
mm.
is a great fit for this team. And nobody's talked about it. There's probably a reason nobody's talked about it, but I think the Cavs would be dumb to not look into it and at least see what could happen, especially if, I think the locker room would like it.
They might. That's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard.
You don't have any comments?
I'm just kidding. Kevin Love, look, I think there's like probably a 0% chance it happened just because of how it ended. But I mean, yeah, like everyone talks about the Cavs need a stretch big or a floor spacer. I think stretch big is even more rare than the 3-and-D wing that we talk about. That word just gets thrown out there like there's stretch bigs all over the court or all over the NBA. Kevin Love is really one of the only guys who is like actually a floor spacer who can play the 4 and 5 and rebound and bring what you would want from a big man. Like teams respect him as a shooter and they defend him as a shooter even when the shot isn't falling. So yes, you know how I feel about Kevin Love. He would be a perfect fit. I mentioned this earlier in the pod that losing him was part of the reason why the Allen spacing issue became such a huge highlight, is that you didn't have anyone to stagger Mobley and Allen with. So Kevin Love is still one of the better options to solve that issue. I don't know how his relationship is with Kobe. It sounds like the players still love him. So if there was somehow a miracle reunion there, I would be very happy with that. But it sounds like Apollo does not like it if you can hear him barking right now.
He loves it.
He's advocating for it.
Yeah. Says, bring Kevin Love back.
Yeah. Everyone loves Kevin Love, man, except for
Kobe
Twitter.
and JB.
Yeah. But no, I think we really did hit every target now after that. Paulo's gonna bark the whole outro probably here, but
let him.
It is the Junkyard Pod, named after the Junkyard dog. So Apollo's bringing us out here. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be continuing to cover the Cavs off season as more craziness continues. Someone is delivering DoorDash right now. That's why he's going crazy, if anyone's wondering. But thank you, Jackson, as always. It's a great episode, and we'll see you guys probably after free agency starts.
I agree. Go Cavs.